Hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to confidence in starting and growing your business. My guest this week is Kate Davis, founder of Meraki People, a business focused on helping founders and leadership teams build healthier, stronger and more scalable organisations. Now, what struck me about Kate's story, as you'll hear in this interview, is the honesty with which she talks about her entrepreneurial journey. Because unlike some founders who always knew exactly where they were heading, Kate describes a very long and winding road through law, live events, change management and corporate life, before recognising in the end that something was fundamental about herself. She simply wasn't very good at being employed by someone else, as you'll hear her describe. Not because she lacked anything, but because of what she really, really wanted, the freedom to think differently, move quickly and shape her own direction. Today, Kate works with scaling businesses on leadership, people, culture and growth, helping founders to avoid becoming trapped by the very companies they work so hard to build. So, as always, I ask Kate to take me back to those early years and to the influences, frustrations and turning points that eventually led her to back herself and build a business of her own.
My father ran his own business for his whole life. He was an optician and was always coming up with not harebrained schemes, because he was always very clinical and very sort of strategic in it. But there was always a new project. There was always a new challenge. So I was obviously brought up around that. Making your own money, making your own way in life was a core value for him, and it's obviously seeped into me. Which probably then starts to answer your second question, Trevor, of how did I get into this? I think I have one of those squiggly careers where I've been in all sorts of different places. I started off in law, then came out of law, went into the event world, then went back into corporate before I finally saw sense. And I think the reason why I didn't do very well I'm not very good at working for other people. I need to be my own boss. I need to be master of my own destiny. And I think when you don't respond very well to the environment that you're in, that doesn't really help you. I don't like being told what to do. I like being guided. I like being mentored. I like being encouraged. And I'm quite comfortable with somebody saying, I think you're wrong. But being sort of put into a framework that I didn't felt sit very well with me was probably one of the reasons why I kept trying to break out and kept trying to come up with new ideas. But actually, as you say, as you've led me into that beautifully, it's clearly come from my father of make your own destiny, make your own way.
I mean, were you aware of that? I mean, law, that you went into is notoriously, obviously there are rules in law and people do tell you what to do, or the law tells you what to do about certain things. So were you conscious of the fact that actually this is not how I sort of grew up and how I developed, or did it take you a while to sort of work that one out?
It didn't take me very long to realise that law wasn't for me. I loved studying it. I absolutely love studying it. It's fascinating to look at, particularly case law, tort law, and understanding what happens to people when situations impact them. I've obviously had lots of time to reflect. I didn't think about any of this at the time, Trevor, at all. I went into it because it was a profession, and my father had always said, well, make sure you've got something you can always lean back on. No one can take that away from you. And he's absolutely right. Gave me a very good grounding for lots of different things. But I don't think I realised, I thought I was just doing the right thing. I was going into doesn't get too much more prestigious than being a solicitor in a magic law circle law firm. I don't think I realised then what I know now about how it just didn't suit me. I understood that practicing law didn't suit me. I hated being a bad guy. I went into litigation, so it didn't matter how hard I'd worked or how many people's birthday parties I'd missed or any of that. I was still the bad guy. Even if we won, I hated being the bad guy. And I hated the sort of the structure and the rules around it, even though I understood them. I suspect that the rebel in me was trying to push my way out. But unfortunately, rather than sort of seeing that structurally, I saw that as I'm just not cut out for this.
Was there a particular moment that you could crystallize where you thought, I've just got to get out of here?
Well, I think it was probably two. I was in an appraisal where it wasn't going very well, Trevor. I'm not going to lie. And the senior, the partner who was giving me the appraisal was a terrifying woman. She was the sort of woman amazing woman, but sort of woman who she walked into a room and the air just got a little bit colder. And she was actually really kind, and she said, law isn't the only career out there. And I was the first, horribly affronted. I'd worked for years and years and years to get to this, and how dare she? And it obviously stuck with me for a little while. I moved on from that firm, moved to a bigger firm. And I think the moment for me was actually a conversation with my sister where we were on the phone one evening and she said, "Oh, how was your day?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm on the third day of rewriting a piece of advice for a client." This is obviously, it's probably just about the time of email, but not where AI could do half of it for you. And I was constantly having my grammar corrected by the partner above me, and I was just so frustrated. I just wanted to do something and not constantly have to change that word and that word. And she said, "Do you know what I did today?" She worked as an event producer. I worked out how to make a car appear at the motor show. Does it appear in a cloud of smoke, or does it come through from the ceiling, or is there a grand reveal, or does it come in incognito? And I thought, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? I didn't necessarily want to do that, but that was just such a complete contradiction to what I was doing, and just felt so free and creative and fun in comparison to let's just rewrite this 14-page document again. And that was the moment for me where I just thought, I can't do this anymore. My then husband came back from an evening out with his brother, and I just said, "Oh, by the way, I'm resigning tomorrow." "Are you? Oh, what are you going to do that?" "I've no idea." No idea, but I'm not doing this anymore.
Okay, so eventually you did sort of find your way out, and I want to move on to sort of Merri-Cast people that you sort of found in 2019. But let's just briefly go through the gap in between those two things. So what led you to do that? What did you do after you'd escaped the clutches of the legal profession?
The clutches. I actually did go into live event management completely by accident. My sister said, come and help me out this afternoon," and I thought, this is great fun. And I spent 15 years having a wonderful time working on very, very big launches, AGMs, car launches, all sorts of things like that. And the one thing that I've really picked up on, apart from being able to manage teams under high pressure, because there is no more pressured environment apart from probably working in emergency medicine than live events, because you have to be on time, you have to be on budget, the doors open, and there are people outside, hopefully if you've invited them properly. There are people outside who want the thing that you've invited them to. So it's very high pressure, very high stakes. But one thing that keeps coming back to me is understanding client. We would often go in, whether it was at pitch or early stages, we would go and meet the fairly senior people of global, household name companies. And I could tell within 30 seconds of being in the room whether this was going to be an easy job or a hard one, whether we were going to lose our profit margin on extra time placating client, or whether this was just going to be a breeze and we were going to really love it and bring all of our favorite suppliers on board. Because of the dynamic in that room, how well the people in that room were communicating, how well they were getting on, how clear they were on the brief. And again, I didn't recognize that at the time as something that I would actually end up making my living from doing. But I was never wrong. Let's put it that way. So I think that was a really key observation, that whenever I say that to people, like, "Oh yes, no, we've all been in that room, haven't we, with people where you don't get on, you don't communicate very well, and there's almost a sort of a frosty atmosphere." And then for life reasons, I had children and couldn't be in Barcelona one week and Dubai the next, which sounds very glamorous. It never really was. So I went and got a proper job, which in change management and business architecture. And again, loved the subject matter, loved the people I worked with. But again, number one, I'm not very good at being employed. I'm not very good at not being able to change my stars, not being able to make an impact in the way and at the speed I want to be able to. So I learned an awful lot and came away thinking I can only work with people who want to change.
Mm.
I can't work with slow-moving oil tankers. I want to work with people who really care about the work that they do, which is why I now work with founders of mid-sized businesses, because they're still hungry, they're still curious, they still want to learn, they recognize that they don't know everything, and they're not so tied up in red tape that they can't make a change.
And I'm really interested in sort of finding out a bit more about one or two of the people and how they're featured in your entrepreneurial
Mm.
journey. So let's get back to that point about you're not very good at being employed by someone, as you put it, which is a very honest way of putting it. So you eventually ended up founding Merri People, so just take me through that moment where I am going to set up by myself, and I'm going to be doing so. First of all, did you set up by yourself or were you with other people? And what was the original vision for the business?
No, it was me. It was very much me. And almost as a reaction, I can't do that anymore, so I will work out what it is I'm going to do. I wish that I am a very big picture thinker, but I wish that I'd had the sort of the strategic thought of what it was I could end up doing. I retrained as a coach primarily because I'd taken on a coach when I left left change management to try to work out what it was I did, and actually I loved the process, and so I retrained as a coach. And I didn't set up as Merri People by any stretch. I set up in my own name. 7, 8 months after I set up, COVID hit,
Mm,
and so these great ideas about how I was going to get out and network with my old network and etc., that disappeared, and so I had to pivot during COVID.
mm,
And interestingly, I was working with much smaller businesses. I'm generally a very peoply person, so I wanted to help the people who were closest to me to be able
mm,
to support them through, and how did they set up a business? How did they working in the event world that just disappeared? There were so many of my friends who had no career.
mm.
But actually, interestingly, when I talked to any of those people who I coached in the very early days, they all said, "You were never a coach. There were so many more strings to your bow." I don't think I had the confidence at that point. I think
Mm.
every point where I decided to leave because I just didn't feel like I
Do you
fit
do you mean confidence as a coach or confidence as an entrepreneur?
as an entrepreneur.
As an
Yeah,
entrepreneur, okay, right.
yeah. I've suited coaching very well. Use a lot of psychometric profiling in the work that I do, and I know from my psychometric profiling that I'm a born coach and mentor and advisor. It's who I'm supposed to be.
Mm,
That bit came really easily to me, but the belief, as I know, kind of is in your story as well, Trevor. The belief that I could actually do this, and how the hell was
mm,
I going to do this, and how was I going to bring all of this together? The belief that actually I could advise as well as coach, that
mm.
actually I didn't have to have all the answers in order to be able to bring some support to other people.
Yeah.
We often think of our superpowers as something that everybody shares, but our failures are ours alone.
Mm,
And I think the same is with our experience. Isn't this obvious? Well, it's obvious to you, but it's not obvious to everybody else. And that one thing, that one piece of information, can change somebody's stars, can change the way that a business operates, just because somebody hasn't looked at it in that way before.
mm,
I don't think I had the confidence in myself that I could say, this is who I am. And actually, if you'd asked 2019 me where I would be in 2026, I would not be Ned, a board advisor, speaking on stages, writing a book, all of those things. That was so far away from where I thought I could be.
So you've set up this business, pandemic hits, you're operating on a certain level,
Mm,
but you don't feel that confidence at
mm.
this point. How did things start to change for you?
Things started to change when I started to meet people who saw something in me that I didn't see, and started to put me in touch with the right people. I had a couple of great mentors. I am a huge advocate for mentoring from a business perspective and also a personal perspective. A couple of great mentors who saw something in me and encouraged me to bring together what it was that not only my skill set and my experience, but also to really get stuck into what I really believed and stand up for my own thinking. I mean, Merri People itself, I rebranded into 2024 when I realised that I didn't want to do this on my own. And Merri is the Greek word to put yourself, your creativity, your love into the work that you do.
Okay.
I know from working with founders, from solo business owners up to 100 million plus people, that when people love the work that they do, they are more productive, they're more engaged, they do better at their job, whether that's the CEO or whether that's the entry level intern. And so everything that we are as Merri People, and we're still very small, but everything we are as Merri People is very much around that core belief of my mug says nothing great is made alone. Being as part of a team is incredibly important, and being able to work together, knowing when you are not the right person to do the job. When you set up your own business, you are chief cook and bottle washer, you're head of marketing, you're head of sales, you're head of whatever it might be. Realizing that actually you can't be all things to all people, and that's not financially viable as well as emotionally viable, is really important as well.
And I should say for those listening to this podcast that Kate also has a sign behind her saying, "I do all my own stunts." So I think there's some evidence for what you're just saying. So
Yes, well, interesting that I deliberately put that over my shoulder. I bought it for myself, and then a client spotted it. And actually, when I speak to a new client for the first time, and as I say, I work typically with people with turnover between 30 and about 100 million, so bigger businesses. And I say, how can I help? And the two most common things they say are either that thing over your shoulder, that's what's happening. I've hired this big team and I'm still doing all my own stunts, or it's just no fun anymore.
Hmm.
And that comes through time after time after time, where people have struggled to get to a point and they think it's going to get easier and then it gets harder again and things go in cycles. So making sure you've got good people around you who will support you, who will champion you, and who will also tell you when you're going wrong
Hmm.
is invaluable, whether you're starting up or whether you've got a large business.
Okay, so so you mentioned 2024, you decided you didn't want it to be just you, you wanted to sort of bring people on, and so you decided you didn't want to do all your own stunts, that you wanted other people in. Then what made you realize that? Was there a particular event, or was it just a desire to scale up yourself?
I think a desire to scale, definitely, but also knowing myself very well. I knew that I don't function very well on my own. I am an extrovert. I need to be able to bounce ideas off people. I know that my best work comes from when I've got somebody to sort of play around with in from an ideas perspective. I've often described extroverts as like two Labrador puppies, that they'll jump over the top of one another in and out of each other's sentences, and that's how we make our ideas better.
Hmm.
So even just from looking at who I am, I know I don't do very well on my own,
Hmm.
but I also knew that I couldn't help the size of companies I wanted to work for if it was just me,
Hmm.
as well as not wanting to do all of my own stunts, recognizing that there will be people who are better at other bits of what we do than I am,
Hmm.
and I'm being totally comfortable with that.
Okay. I mean, the people around you now, what do they do better than you?
So my partner in crime is also called Kate. She is my business manager. It confuses everybody, and everyone says, "Do you just have two email addresses and pretend you've got somebody who helps you?" No, she's a real person, and she is my sounding board. She is the structure, and she provides structure. I, like so many entrepreneurs, am neurodivergent. I have ADHD, and she is neurotypical. She creates the structure, and she holds me to task, and she makes sure I don't forget things, as well as looking at new opportunities for me and things like that. So she runs the business while I go off and do what I do in terms of delivery. And then because of who I am, I like to collect really cool people. I'm fascinated by people, otherwise I wouldn't do what I do, Trevor. And so I find amazing people, and I always know that there is going to be somewhere for somebody. So I work alongside people who have exited their own businesses and are able to work from a more structured business advisory perspective. I work with some excellent coaches who want to just coach. I don't want to just coach. I can't help but getting my fingers in pies. And one of the things I love to do is work out actually who do we need? Who do we need to make this project to help this client to the best way that we possibly can? And I think in the old days, I would probably have assumed that meant that I had failed somewhere along the line if I wasn't able to be all things to all people. And now I love the fact that it's not just me.
Great. Okay. Now, let's talk about, some of the work that you're doing with clients. You've helped businesses achieve impressive growth results. I mean, growth isn't for everybody. Not everybody wants growth, but for those that, that you've helped in that way, I mean, what makes them different? What helps them scale where others struggle?
I think curiosity is a big thing. That idea of always wanting to, always looking to get better. What are other people doing? How could we be better at what we're doing? That's a big piece of the puzzle. Leaders, particularly who are self-aware, who recognize where they might be getting in their own way, either because they're being sort of too dictatorial or they're keeping things to themselves, where they recognize that and are willing to change themselves as well as change the business. That's such a big part of it. And obviously I'm going to say this, Trevor, but those who recognize that actually the people and the structure underneath the people are the biggest change. I was reflecting this. I spoke recently at Scale London, and I was listening to a lot of the speakers ahead of me who had scaled to 50 million, 100 million turnover, etc., and was really struck by the fact that every single person I ever speak to, every single founder, once they have exited, once they have achieved a level of success, they always look back and say, people and culture were probably the biggest game changer in my business. And for some reason, as people are growing, they find it difficult to see that. You can't. There is no line on your P&L for culture or development. It's not tangible in that way. It's very tangible when it's not going well, but it's not very tangible if everything is ticking along perfectly okay. It's only impacts when things start creaking. But those who get that, they are made or broken by the people around them. Biggest asset, biggest liability. You spend more on your people than you spend on anything else. Why are you not looking after them? So I think willingness to change, curiosity, willingness to not stick too rigidly to what they said in the first place. So many great businesses have had to pivot. And the really great businesses have recognised this in themselves and recognised that whilst we set out to do this, we've accidentally started doing this thing over here, and it's sort of adjacent to what we do, but it isn't really what we do. And then realising that actually that's where the market is. That's where the market needs us to be. Right, we are going to, and having the courage to do that. So many great businesses have become great once they pivoted.
Now, you said something very interesting early on in the conversation about, you didn't want people to tell you what to do. And, and so you've got entrepreneurial leaders who are used to being entrepreneurial. They get to a certain stage, they get stuck. Do you come across people and have this instinct that the person you're talking to really wants to change? They think they want to change, or they say, but they don't really want to change. I mean, are there people who you've walked away from and said, I don't think you actually do want to change, but you're just trying to tick a box because somebody told you to or something?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It can sometimes, I can usually sense it quite early on, but it's often a question of what they come to me for. So some people will come to me because I do run workshops, I do run SLT days, away days and things like that, and I can come and do that for people. But actually, if they've come to me for help, there's a reason that something isn't going as well as they would like it to. And once I'm doing my due diligence and asking those questions of them, if I'm sensing resistance, I'm not pushy, but I will just gently push on that and say, oh, is that something you're looking to improve? Is that like something you're looking to? And you can tell very quickly whether they're just no, we're just coming in here because we want to have a nice away day, for
Mm,
example.
mm.
I don't do team building exercises. No, nobody falls into each other's arms, or nobody's throwing any beanbags in mine. We do some proper work, and so I have several times said at the outset, I don't think I'm who you need. I think I'm going to want to go at depth, and you don't necessarily need that, and that's absolutely fine. And refer them to people who are probably better suited.
Okay, let's focus on. So that we'll focus now on those who you then sort of have that initial conversation with, and you feel
Mm.
you can help. What's the most common misconception, if you like, people have about what scaling involves for their business?
Certainly, from my perspective, because there are lots of common misconceptions, but I'll stick with what I know best. Is that people problems are people problems, because there very rarely are people problems. People will come to me and say, I've got a culture problem, I've got a people problem. My leadership team aren't cut out for this. I'm paying a fortune for these people, and I'm still doing all my own stunts. I am a firm believer that actually, for the most part, you will always get some duff employees, or you'll get some people who have outgrown their use. But for the most part, people want to do a good job in the work that they do. But they can't do that if the structure underneath them isn't fit for purpose. And I see this in scaling businesses all the time, where the business has grown organically, and actually they sort of bolted people and structures and departments on around the outside. And that works for a while, and then it starts to creak, and then it starts to feel uncomfortable. And that's when you start getting cultural issues. That's where you start getting talent churn. People leaving is a normal part of business. It's part of that cycle. But when you're losing really good people, when your customer service scores are coming in lower than they used to be, when you start to see those issues, people go, oh well, it's a people problem.
Mm.
Let's go a bit deeper and understand what's underneath that. And again, that's a question of willingness to change. I think there's the misconception that we will always have people problems, because people are people, aren't they? People are difficult. And actually, I disagree completely. And it's a lot easier to fix than most people think. It's just, let's strip it back. Let's look at what we need to do. Let's make some small adjustments and see what an impact that can make.
I'm curious as to why so many people sort of misconceive around that, because we read articles all the time saying how important culture is, and how important people are. People trot out that people are, I hate this one, people are our greatest asset, and all of these things. And yet we still have a blind spot. Is it because it's just a difficult concept to grab onto and to define, and when you're in the cut and thrust of every day, it's just this big kind of nebulous thing that you can't really focus on?
I think that's very true, and I think it goes into the difficult pot, and therefore it can often get blamed on the individual or a department, rather than actually looking at how have we set them up for success. But I'm also passionate about raising the people agenda to the board agenda. Often I go onto boards, and even senior leadership teams, where the HR director or the CPO isn't on the senior leadership team. I don't understand how that can be a thing. I don't know how you can make strategic decisions without involving the person who is responsible for the people. A great friend of mine and colleague has just retired. He says he's retired from a global organisation where he was CEO, and their board meeting, their board agenda was people, performance, risk, AOB. That's how I think it should be. Obviously, that's how I think it should be. But people needs to be on the board agenda. They need to be discussed in a strategic way, and I
Mm.
don't think they are. I think they are treated as the symptom when things have gone wrong.
Okay. Many founders struggle to stop doing things for themselves, as they grow. What was that like for you?
I'm still learning. You should probably ask Kate that. There are many times where she's like, "I thought you said that I was doing that, but get off."
Yeah.
Um, I think it is difficult, because it's your baby, and it's the thing that you are all you don't have a holiday. If you have your own business, yes, you might go and lie on a beach for a couple of weeks, but your brain is always on the business, and often coming up with brilliant ideas whilst you're lying on the beach, because you're not answering emails. Your brain gets to go somewhere else. it was difficult. And like most things with entrepreneurship, it was difficult and enlightening. And it is a growth process for myself, but also for pretty much everyone I work with. Some of my biggest clients, CEOs of some of the biggest companies I work with, because they're still the founder, they find it really difficult to not jump in and go and fix because they know how to. And yeah, but I could, yes, but it's not for you to fix anymore. And if you go and fix it, that's going to cause more problems than you not fixing it. For me, I had to realize that from a commercial perspective, me doing a lot of the jobs that I was doing meant that I was burning hours doing things that were effectively not fee paying. And therefore I couldn't be doing anything else if I'm burning hours doing things that are not actually driving revenue into the business. We're still a very small business, but making it a commercial decision rather than a personal decision made it a lot easier.
Can I ask you a quick question? I mean, I wasn't going to ask you this question, but seeing as we're all talking about AI at the moment, and leadership itself is being changed by AI, the way we lead, the way we think about, and that it's difficult for leaders to say, look, the future's over there, everybody, and this is how we're going to get there, when AI is changing everything. I mean, has that brought a different dynamic to the kind of conversations that you have been having, and also that you yourself have experienced in your own business?
I think the glory of AI and the trouble with AI is that it is learning so fast that we've got no way of being able to draw a line in the sand to say this is how we think we should handle this, because as soon as you said that, something else has come out that has replaced. It's definitely a conversation that I'm having with a lot of clients. Most at founder level, most in the companies that I'm working with are still trying to work out how this is going to make an impact, unless they are a tech company themselves, obviously. Most of them actually have the same worry. It has become more and more expensive to hire people, particularly hire and train at the lower level. But a lot of my clients are parents as well, and so they feel very keenly this. Well, the business might need us to streamline and bring more AI functions in and that sort of thing. But actually, what does that mean for my child when they're trying to find an entry-level job? What does that mean for the future of work if we're taking out that entry-level position? So that's a conversation that I think will go on and probably needs some government direction on that I won't go into. From my own perspective, I mean, I use AI very, very simply in terms of, Claude is my thinking partner an awful lot of the time. And it stopped me overthinking, which has definitely increased my productivity, and also my thinking. But I do a lot of thinking with AI, and I would say that most of the people I work with are doing that process. That they're stress testing their own ideas. The worry for that is that if they're stress testing their ideas with Claude or ChatGPT or insert Copilot, are they not then communicating that with their senior team? So that's always going to be my reminder of that's the conversation to be having. That's where to have that conversation, not into your phone.
You said something really interesting then about it stops me overthinking, and I can certainly empathise with that. I think one of my personal enemies, if you like, is the danger of overthinking, not thinking about where I am, but overthinking, and to sort of overanalyze. And I mean, do you have is there a little section of people that you work with, or does it affect yourself as well, that you can overthink things, and actually what you need is to underthink things and then act more?
Oh, absolutely. And I see two. I'm going to be general and say two sort of groups of people. Those who are incredibly decisive, who will have a short conversation with somebody else, or probably with their phone talking to, insert AI here, and then make a decision and then move on. I have obviously thought from this from a psychometric profiling perspective, but introverts will often do this. Will often think out loud to one person or one thing that they trust, and then make a decision, and then go and enact it. But I'm a dreadful overthinker. I'm constantly seeking patterns in things. I'm constantly looking at the big picture and then shrinking it back down again, and in that process, and then I throw myself and my own mind monkeys in the middle of that, and then it just turns into a big old mess. And I know so many people who are in exactly that situation. So I've trained my AI to tell me when I'm overthinking. Am I overthinking this? Yes, you are. Go and do this instead.
Right. Brilliant. So alongside running Merri People, you've also been a speaker, advisor, coach, NED. Did you mean to do all that, or does it just did it just tumble out of the work you were doing? Was it like a natural extension or not?
I think it probably was a natural extension. Again, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I was doing all of those things, absolutely not. If you'd asked the person who was usually standing by the side of a stage with a clipboard whether I would be on it a few years later, I definitely wouldn't have thought that. So speaking started to happen because I had to, and actually I realised that I absolutely love it. And I think what I do is often misunderstood. So when people hear it, it makes sense to them. So from my perspective, I love doing it, and it's also a great lead gen opportunity to be able to meet really interesting people and do things that I wouldn't otherwise do. In terms of the NED roles and the board advisory, as I kind of grew in confidence, but also in experience as well, I've been doing this a long time now, realizing that actually where I can be of most value to my clients is at that senior position, that actually I need to be speaking to the decision makers and those people who are in control. And actually, whilst I used to hate the word governance, governance is incredibly important. The structures that we build, the rules, and that maybe it is the lawyer in me, the rules that we set for people to be able to work within, the structures from which to deviate, perhaps, are really important. So looking at that from a board perspective, the natural progression was actually to become a NED myself and be able to do that within a company where I can have a little bit more agency.
That's really interesting because I'm thinking back to the beginning of this interview when you were saying you just didn't like being employed, being
Mm.
told what to do. Now, being a NED and a coach, actually, you're asked your thoughts and where or you ask good questions, and sometimes you give your thoughts about what people should do. And then if they don't do them, do you get equally frustrated the other way around? Does it work in reverse that if people aren't doing, because that can be a skill, to be able to accept that, that people aren't necessarily going to do what you say they should do or the way you say they should do it.
Yes, from a personal perspective, it can be frustrating, but at the same time, it's knowing what your role is, and as a NED, your role is there to challenge. That role is there to scrutinise, to look at what has been going well, what hasn't been going well, challenging what might be. And actually, if the decision goes against what I think, as long as I've got my concerns registered and potentially on a risk register somewhere, from the business perspective, I've done my job because I've stretched some thinking, I've done some challenging, I've done some coaching and mentoring probably while I'm there. It's not ultimately my decision to make. So it takes some of the pressure off you to not have to make the decision, to be the one who stretches and challenges.
Mm.
And that's quite a fun process in and of itself.
Okay, so I'm going to do a sort of good and bad question now. Like looking
Yes.
back now, what's the one thing about these last sort of, what are we talking about, 6 or 7 years since you started American People? What's the one thing that you're proudest of, and what's the one thing that you think I really learnt a lesson from that?
I think learning a lesson, the most important thing that I wish I'd learned earlier is understanding my customer journey,
Mm.
understanding where they are, because I can talk about what I believe as much as I like. If they're not ready to hear it, or they're not, if they're symptom aware, not problem aware, if we think about it from marketing speak, then I may as well be talking to my dogs. If they are problem aware but not solution aware, then I've got a different conversation to be having. And I didn't understand that process at all, and that cost me in time and probably some clients as well, potential clients. That's something I really wish I'd known earlier, and to really understand and take myself out of that loop, that yes, I can do all of these great things, but actually if I'm not if they're not ready for it, then either I'm not the right person or they're not the right person. What am I most proud of? Actually, when I look at the companies that I work in and I see the impact the work we've done has made. And I say the work I've done, it's not me. I set the seed and I water it. But the impact from a commercial perspective in terms of growth, we mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation, in terms of growth and in terms of increasing the bottom line, et cetera, but also seeing the people who come to me and say it's just no fun anymore when they get a completely new lease of life. I have clients who said I've been really angry with my business because it's taken and not given. And to then see that turn around and actually see they look completely different. They look like they've been on holiday when they haven't, and see the business grow from the people outwards. That's the most rewarding thing that you can possibly do.
Okay. So final question is, we have a lot of people who listen to this show who are either starting or starting to scale their businesses. Is there a piece of advice that you would give to them?
Oh, one piece of advice that would be difficult. I'm going to, but in part A and part B. Part A is back yourself. Understand yourself and back yourself. And part B would be, but listen to other people too. Find someone who'll tell you no, and then explain to you why. You need to understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are as a person, but also as the business. And having somebody who will tell you both of those things is always going to be a game changer.
And that's where we left it. There's something very refreshing about hearing Kate Davis talk so openly about entrepreneurship, because alongside all the strategy, leadership and growth conversations, there's something very human running through this episode about self-awareness, confidence and recognizing where you actually fit best. I particularly liked Kate's honesty about not thriving in traditional employment and how long it sometimes takes us to realize that this is not only okay, but a sign that we really, truly need something else. And I think a lot of founders and future founders will recognize themselves in that. There was also a really important point in what Kate said about scaling businesses, that growth isn't just about systems, sales or operational processes. It's about people, culture and the way leaders themselves evolve as the business evolves around them. Perhaps most importantly, Kate reminded us that entrepreneurship doesn't mean doing everything alone. Quite the opposite, really. Some of the biggest breakthroughs often come when founders stop trying to do all their own stunts, as she put it. So thank you to Kate, and thank you to all of our listeners and for the great feedback we're getting on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast, look for me, Trevor Meriden, or our business Merriborn at merriborn.co.uk. And until next time, thanks for listening.